Welcome into Between the Lines, episode 11, and today we're going to be recapping the end of one of the NBA Conference Final Series, the Eastern Conference Final Series that just ended with a sweep, the New York Knicks taking down the Cleveland Cavaliers and reaching their first NBA final since 1999. And on the other hand, we have a absolute bloodbath of series going down to the Western Conference Finals, and tonight we have Game 5, a pivotal Game 5 in a 2-2 series in the Western Conference Finals with the Spurs taking on the Thunder. So we're gonna go over both of those series for you. So first we're gonna start with the Knicks Cavs series. Obviously that's that game or that series just ending yesterday. So Tish, as the Donovan Mitchell guy, unfortunately not a great first trip to the conference finals for him and his team. But the Knicks just seem like a little bit too much of a. They just seem like they're too much on a roll this season. A little bit too much of a powerhouse for the Cavs to handle. What were your thoughts on yesterday's game and the series overall as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, just some calm BTA by the Knicks. I think now they're on an 11 game win streak, which is ridiculous. And going into game four, they set the record for like biggest point differential on any 10 game span in the playoffs. It was like plus 225, which is ridiculous. So, I mean, just, hottest team in the league. We both had like Knicks in six, but that was really, we both said like just kind of like taking some of the Cavs ceiling. We realistically could have said Knicks in five, but I mean, even that wouldn't have been enough. It was just a sweep. I mean, not really much to say here. Cavs, they've always just like they're a bit fraudulent. Their path to the conference finals was like they barely made it there. Two game sevens in a row just to make it. Like congrats, you made the conference finals. You didn't really do anything there. I mean, Donovan Mitchell, as much as I love him, his one problem has always been his inconsistency. And while he still did I mean, he dropped 31 in the final game, and I think he had like 23, 25 like the other nights, played like all right, just from a box score point of view, but it's always in a bunch of like streaks and runs. It's never really consistent basketball. So the team has to kind of make a move and kind of decide like, do they think Donovan Mitchell can really be the one on a championship team? If you ask me, as much as I love the guy, I don't think he can really be like that alpha number one. Not saying he can't be a star on a championship team, but like you're gonna have to bring another, at the minimum, someone of his. He's probably like around like the ninth, 10th best player in the league. So you're gonna have to bring in someone around that caliber for them to even have a chance to contend. But James Harden, just pack the bags up, go retire, go to the golf course. Your time in the NBA is coming to an end, my friend. Went out in typical James Harden fashion. Here we go again, more turnovers and field goals made. But yeah, just wrap it up, James Harden. You've overstayed your visit in the league. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, almost everything you said, I'm just like echoing those. I think no bigger like play or series of plays like embodies like how the Cavs played in the series and like at the end of game three, your season's I mean, obviously at that point like the game was pretty much over. There was just like about a minute left. And there's just two straight plays where the Cavs pretty much just stopped playing on defense and like let one of the specifically the one that caused the timeout from Kenny Atkinson, the Cavs just straight up stopped playing defense. Like if you'd watched that play without the audio of the commentators, you probably would have thought it was a dead ball play or a dead ball layup by like Brunson as everyone just stopped there. So it's just like the lack of motivation from anyone on the team, just the lack of a fight. Especially you never see like in a big time series like this, or what we thought going into the series was going to be a big time series, two like heavyweight teams. You never see, especially when a team goes down like 2-0 or 3-0, like for them to just roll over and just like not like put up a fight when their backs are against the wall. And that's what you saw in these last two games, like especially the blowout in yesterday's game or last night's game, and then the not a blowout, but like a pretty comfortable win for the Knicks for most of game three. So it's like you really need to, like you said, if you're the Cavs front office, you need to take a step back and look at this season and say, obviously you have to determine was the season a success or not, which like more than likely, I mean, I guess you could look at that from multiple ways. Like you didn't have as bad of a, I guess last season with the way they went out in the second round with being such a high seed and losing to an underdog. You could look at making the conference finals like this as a success, but then do you want to say since we got swept like this so badly, and it really wasn't that close. Do you want to consider this a success? We've seen teams in the past, they make one conference finals run, they think they're there, they start making all-in moves without realizing that maybe that one run was a little bit of a fluke or just like happened to be the result of a good path or something like that. So you want to be like careful with that. But like you said too, James Harden, I think he's going to be more heading for the strip clubs more than a golf course, but I think like he's done too. So I think overall just really like just a moment where the Cavs front office needs to be honest with themselves. And like you said, as much as you love Donovan Mitchell as a fan of him, like even you can be honest, like maybe he needs like another guy there to be like that number one, or at least as strong of a number two as he is. He needs at least someone of that caliber or something like that to see if they could make a real run at it. But any other thoughts on that before we hit the other series?
Yeah, just like I saw it was kind of interesting because I mean the closest game of this series was game one, where I mean obviously the Knicks went on that insane 30-6 run, but it's kind of like the 2018 finals where like I mean both were sweeps, but we saw like game one, people say like if the Cavs won, could have changed the entire like series. Same team about like 8 years later. They lose game one, people were like if they had won that, you never know what could happen, but yeah, it was pretty rough. And then I think one thing that just summarizes everything is I don't know if you saw James Harden's like post game presser where they just asked him about his thoughts on the season. Like they asked him specifically like how did you think your individual performance was? And like this guy just has no shame, like no awareness of the moment. He like pretty much said that I think I did pretty well and I came in and did my role like getting guys shots in a system that's already built. So like the way I look at it, he just pretty much says like he just doesn't watch film. Like he came in, like just did what he usually does, didn't really want to adapt and change anything, just cater to a system that's already there. Man,
I mean,
just leave,
yeah,
man, leave this
he
team.
he comes in and gives you his. You can't even say he's giving you like 30, like a triple double. Like right now, he's giving you like maybe 20 points per game, maybe like 10 assists per game, and that's it. Like he's obviously not there to be like a veteran leader or anything like that. He's shown that multiple times. He doesn't really care about that. So I think his time with the Cavs. I guess we have to see details of the contract because obviously he went there requesting the trade and everything because he wanted the contract extension that he wasn't going to get from the Clippers. So we have to see what it looks like contract wise and money wise. But I think the Cavs would be keen to move off of his contract this offseason. So I guess let's move on to the next series, the Western Conference Final Series. Like we predicted before, we predicted both of us was thought this series was going to go 7 games. It looks like it's going to go 7 games after now. We have a split after 4 games. 2-2, San Antonio winning game four. A little bit of a like it got towards of a blowout at the end, but a little bit of a contested game at the beginning, but then they pulled away at the end. And now we have game five tonight back in Oklahoma City, the place where when this series started. Wemby dropped his ridiculous masterpiece in that game, won a 40 and 20 game. Um, so let's just repivot. So now we have 3 games left in the series. It's a best of three now. What are your thoughts heading into this game five tonight? And anything changed for you? Do you see it still playing out in OKC in seven? Do you see San Antonio winning? Just what are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, I mean this is really lived up to all the hype. We've had some pretty good games here, especially that game one, where we did our reaction. But um I think the series is definitely one interesting thing that's changed about the series was like Stephon Castle is having a lot of turnover issues, especially in games one and two. I think he broke the record for like most turnovers in consecutive games in the playoffs. He had 11 and then nine, so like 20 turnovers in 2 games, ridiculous. But since then, he's really locked in on taking care of the ball better. He's had a lot fewer turnovers. I think he had one in one of the games and like very few in the other one as well. So taking care of the ball has definitely helped the Spurs. Pretty pivotal for getting that game four win after they went down 2-1. And then the other thing is the Spurs in general, I think they stepped up their defensive pressure. We kind of saw like in game four, Shea had like a rough night shooting 6 for 15. Part of that loss could be attributed to the fact that like J-Dub was injured, AJ Mitchell was injured, but I think at this point, like, OKC has played without. I mean, AJ Mitchell really ascended like later in the year, so they played without his like high production for a long time. And then even J-Dub, he missed so much time this year that I saw like OKC fans online even saying that they think the team just plays better without J-Dub because they're so used to him not being there. And when he comes in, like you don't really see a lot of nights where he has individual success and the team wins. Like we saw in game one where um I believe he was up there with Caruso for being the leading scorer at like 26 points, but obviously they lost. So while like OKC is injured, I don't really think it's valid for them to use that as too much of an excuse for that game four loss. But really good series so far, 2-2. I think to me the key if the Spurs really want to take this home is they got to improve their 3-point shooting. They've had some rough nights from beyond the arc, shooting like roughly 30%. Obviously, there's that one game, I believe it was game four, where both teams shot atrociously from beyond the line, beyond the arc. It was like 27% and 18%. But it was just one of those games where the defense was high, not really a lot of shot making on both sides. But I'm really intrigued to see how this series goes. My original pick was OKC in seven, but at the same time, like the only reason I didn't pick the Spurs was I was just not too confident in like, can Wemby handle a high minute workload, which he shut me up right away in game one right off the bat. Can like this young team, even though both are young, can they shine bright when the lights are brightest? And so far they have. I'm still gonna lean OKC in seven. I just think that maybe, this team has what it takes to get it done for the second year with that little bit of like edge with the experience. But this is literally like a coin flip to me. Like I could see the Spurs winning. I want the Spurs to win as a personal, like we're taking my like analytics out of this game, just my personal fandom. I want the Spurs to win, but I think I'll lean OKC in seven, go in seven regardless, either way. What do you
Yeah.
think? Maybe or some things that have to change if the Spurs want to win, and just in general, what's your outlook for the rest of the series here?
Yeah, I think the way that the Spurs sort of switched up their defensive game plan in the last game specifically, I think is something they could rely on to help them win the rest of the series. So we saw at the beginning of the series, specifically game one, we saw their idea was anyone but Shea. So they're gonna sell out to double team Shea. They're gonna stop Shea from getting his and say, all right, if anyone else beats us, we tip our cap to it, so be it. And they almost lost that game one because of that strategy. We saw how well Caruso played, shooting like levels of like 2016 Steph Curry. Like he was playing ridiculously well in
Mhm.
that game, and they almost lost it, save not for a ridiculous 1B masterpiece. But the way they switched it up in the last game was specifically, all right, instead of just saying let's let everyone else get theirs, let's have Shea get his and stay at home on everyone else. And I mean, we saw how that played into his bad shooting night specifically, not reaching over 20 points. Which one thing I want to mention, like we've talked so much about Shea and his efficiency in the regular season and that 20-point scoring streak. Dating back to the beginning of last postseason, he's had 5 games under 20 points. So as much as we count, obviously that streak and the one that he broke Wilt's streak was just a regular season thing, so that doesn't matter for the streak purpose. But it's something to mention that he hasn't been playing up to the level that he usually does in terms of his scoring potential during the playoffs. So it's 5 games dating back to the beginning of last postseason, with under 20 points. So just something to notice there. But like I mentioned before, so he's 19 points in this last game and not shooting a great efficiency from the field. So that's one thing I think the Spurs need to keep doing because especially now that you're switching back to a home game specifically tonight in OKC, you know that your role players tend to play better at home. Do you really want to be leaving guys like Alex Caruso, Jared McCain, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, all those types of guys? Do you really want to be leaving them open and daring them to beat you when they have the confidence to be able to step into those shots, especially playing at home with the backing of the home crowd? I think you're going to want to play Shea and play the rest of the players on the Thunder the way you played them in this most game. Play them straight up, play everyone's single coverage, and try not to let those role guys beat you with getting hot. Especially if you let guys get hot at the beginning of the game, you know that how that just helps you just get into a rhythm more, and you're able to shoot better later in games too. So I would stick with the strategy they have right now. Let some of your really good defensive guards, specifically like Steph Castle and guys like that, let them get the one-on-one matchup versus Shea, and just see what they can do there, and limit the rest of the other role guys, and let them just play their role. Let them have to make tough shots. Let them make tough contested shots. Don't give them open shots or things like that. You have Wemby patrolling the paint, obviously, so he's going to be able to take care of the bigs and things like that. So I like the strategy they've played with so far in Game Four, and obviously it worked well. A blowout win in Game Four, but this is definitely. I think today's game is going to be as good as Game One. Like I'm really anticipating another like classic game tonight. I think the Spurs are going to win tonight. I think they're going to take Game Five and have a 3-2 lead going back to San Antonio. I mean, I'm still predicting in seven, so I think OKC is going to take Game Six. But I think tonight's game is going to be another classic. And I'm thinking if San Antonio can stay with the game plan they've done so far, and just stick with how they've been guarding Shea, specifically in last game, and just continue with that. Don't let the role players for OKC step into the shots and let them have too much confidence going into their shots. You want all their stuff to be contested and everything like that. So I think if they can stick with this game plan, they have a good shot of winning tonight and winning the rest of the series. And then staying on the idea of like Shea overall and like just his lack of efficiency this series. So we've talked about before how no one really has looked at like Shea and been like, obviously while he's a talented player and things like that, one of the reasons that some people have really like looked down on him as just an overall like superstar is the thing because of his free throws and things like that and how his style of play and everything like that. I think this is the type of series where like we haven't really said like most of us don't really have like a moment in our head idealized for Shea as like, oh, this is Shea's moment. This is what happened. Like this is when he cooked or when he did something like this, and he was like, this is his big playoff moment. I think if they're to win this series, I think they need something like that. I think they need like if they go down 3-2, or if it's a game seven or something like that, or if they win tonight in a really dominating fashion, I think it needs to be like a Shea moment. And I think that could be something that helps him propel into that like superstar tier, not necessarily just because of his like stats and everything like that. Obviously he's up there, but more just like the recognition of being a superstar and things like that. I think he needs like a moment like that. Obviously he did have that good game four in the finals last year, but with that series going seven, and obviously people talk about like who knows what would have happened if Halliburton even stays healthy for that game seven. So I think he needs like to have that type of like moment in this series. Just something to showcase to the world. Like he obviously he uses the free throws a lot, but like he's a talented player. He can still get his, and he can like meet the moment when it requires it. So that's sort of what I think about like where the series stands right now from the Spurs perspective, and then like the OKC Shay's perspective of it.
Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, like we haven't seen like a Shea masterpiece, like a Shea just like clutched hit. I mean, he won clutch player of the year, but we haven't really seen like outside of game one where he had that layup on Steph Castle. He hasn't had like a
Yeah,
major clutch moment. So
he's been outdueled by Wemby in the clutch, if anything,
yeah,
like this entire series.
it's not even close. I mean, there were even like questions after games one and two, like if OKC wins, is Shea even the Western Conference Finals MVP? It should be Alex Caruso. But I mean, now Shea's probably taking over the lead, but still he hasn't had like that iconic Shea moment. So if they want to win this series, they're definitely going to need a masterpiece from him. And I think it's interesting you mentioned like the defensive strategy for the Spurs because like OKC's role players aren't just regular role players. Like, you can't just like leave them open. You got to get a hand up, kind of like you said. So force them to make tough shots. Otherwise, we're going to see nights like Alex Caruso turning into like unanimous MVP Curry. Like you can't let that happen for the Spurs. And then one other interesting aspect I think to touch on is like Spurs have been always known for, I mean, as deep as OKC is, the Spurs have also had similar depth, especially with like the rookie Dylan Harper, his rise this year. But I think this entire series, they haven't really had a lot of outside of game one where Harper dropped like 24. I think if I'm not mistaken, since then there's only been one double-digit bench score, just like Dylan Harper had like 11 or 12 in another night. Since then, like it's really just been kind of like relying on the starting five. Like and there's pretty much like win or lose through Wemby, and Steph Castle had a big night, obviously also. But I think we're gonna, especially when we get later into the series, we're gonna need some of these bench guys to not like they can't like rely on like Dylan Harper to drop 20 a night. Like Keldon Johnson, the sixth man of the year, drop like 15, 16 every single night. But we're going to need him to step up a little bit because as we get deeper into the series, guys are going to get fatigued, especially Wemby, a guy who like his body requires so much physical maintenance and recovery. Like he stretches for like 2 hours a game right before. So like you can't ask him to play 40 minutes every single night. He's obviously going to have to, but he's going to need some rest. So I think we're going to need to see some of these bench guys step up again. Can Dylan Harper kind of like recreate his masterclass in the last series against the Wolves? Like, can he be that consistent, like 14, 15, like kind of like microwave scorer off the bench that just heats up and kind of keeps things going in the non-Wemby minutes? Same with like Keldon Johnson. Like he won six man of the year for a reason. You had a lot of memes on Twitter about like how you drive into the paint, like just like can you step up, play well, and I think we're gonna need some more depth from the Spurs if they want to win this. But interestingly enough, I kind of think that the Spurs will take game five. And I've always been a guy that I think we both agree on this, where we said in the past, where like game five is probably the most important game in a series, especially now when it's tied 2-2, because that's going to drive the momentum from here on out. Like if the Spurs win game five on the road, they have all the momentum going at home for game six where they could close it out. So I guess we'll see what happens tonight, but really excited for this one.
Yeah, and so the one thing I want to touch on, so you mentioned specifically with the Spurs depth, I think the thing that's been killing them the biggest in the non-Wemby minutes is that the fact that they have to play Luke Cornett. And while Luke Cornett, obviously he was really good in the regular season and spelled Wemby for a lot of the minutes and allowed him to play not too many minutes during the regular season, which is obviously a point of contest during the MVP debates. But I think the biggest issue with that is the Thunder are able to like take advantage of Luke Cornett being out there and take advantage of his minutes by like isolating him and getting him in isolation and things like that. And they're able to score a lot of their points on there or get a lot of like rolls to the paint for their big guys and things like that without Wemby defending the paint. So I wonder if one thing that the Spurs could potentially try is in their non-Wemby minutes, maybe going small ball and like maybe running with a lineup, potentially with Harrison Barnes at center or something, or playing your mock center or something like that, so to speak, or even a guy like Keldon Johnson, particularly because of his size and strength, what he brings. Obviously, as an offensive player, he's really talented in the way he's able to drive and things like that, using his strength. But he could he use some of that strength on the defensive end to like sort of like obviously with Hardenstein it's going to be tougher because he's a stronger player and he's going to be able to bowl over some of the smaller players that aren't Wemby. But if you're matching up with Chet at the center position, I could even see a guy like Steph Castle potentially being able to like withhold against like Chet and like get him out of the paint, box him out of that area. So I think that's one thing I think the Spurs might want to try and experiment in. Maybe not in this game five since it's so like pivotal. You want to run with what's been working for you so far, but maybe even that game six or something like that. If you're up, like, do you try and like, or especially maybe if you're down, even do you try and like tinker with that or something? Just see, can you just do something that can get you out of the typical looks you've been in the non-Wemby minutes and see if you can change something up there. So that'd be something I would see maybe if the Spurs wanted to do, just see like can they switch it up because they've been losing those minutes pretty badly. Um, and it's been pretty hard for them. Their net rating when Wemby's off the floor has been like horrific this series. So is that something they could try just to get out of those core net minutes and see if they could switch up something there?
Yeah, and I actually kind of like to add on to that, especially because I mean, outside of like iHeart, I feel like the OKC's like center big man rotation isn't really that physically imposing. Like Chet's not really that much
Mm,
of a dominant paint presence, and then like even more so, their backup center, Jalen Williams, the center, he's kind of like more like a stretch big. He likes to
yeah.
do his damage from beyond the arc. So like kind of like you said, if they can get like kind of like a more physical guy like Keldon Johnson, even like Steph Castle, maybe even like Harrison Barnes for crying out loud, like some of these like bigger, more physical guys for their position, they could probably do some job deterring like in the non-Wemby minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, and then one more thing I want to touch on. So we saw this specifically in game two and game three, and we sort of saw like the scales tip back to the Spurs in game four. But so we saw in game one, Wemby, every single one of Wemby's points, except for that three-pointer he had in overtime or in the end of regulation, I forgot exactly which one it was. But almost every single one of his points he had otherwise than that was just in the paint or near the restricted area specifically. And then we saw in game two and game three, we saw Daigneault deployed Hardenstein more because he barely played in the first game. And that second and third game, Hardenstein played a lot more, and then he was able to sort of get away with. I mean, a lot of it was like you could look at it, a lot of them in slow mo and be like, okay, a lot of these are like fouls and things like that. The way he was grabbing Wemby, but it's like people talk about with OKC, like is that Legion of Boom type thing the Seahawks used to have. Like you can't call a foul on every single play; they were gonna foul you every play. So like they were gonna force the refs to either call it every play or let it go. So it's that type of thing where they were able to get on Wemby a lot and just hold him and things like that and like just extra pushes and shoves and things like that. And Hardenstein did a great job of allowing Wemby to be out, moving Wemby out of the paint and things like that, and getting opportunities for his own team to get offensive boards, for him to get offensive boards, and then get defensive boards, secure the defensive boards and push and transition and things like that. So we saw Wemby sort of fight back with that and give his own like just like bring his own physicality to the table in game four. So this has really been like every time that the Spurs have won the physicality battle, they get the win, and every time OKC wins a physicality battle, they're able to win. So I'm really interested to see in Game Five. Like obviously, both teams they know this is effectively a must-win game, even though it's not really an elimination, not an elimination game for either of them. They know this is a must-win game because, like you mentioned before, the momentum swings heavily in the favor of whichever team wins tonight. So I think I'm really excited to see like. I think it's going to be a rock fight, like slugfest type game. I'm not expecting to see a high scoring game today. Um, so I think this could be something where I'm really interested to see in which team brings more physicality and plays with more force today. Because the team, and we saw Shea talking about this a couple weeks back. Obviously, he caught a lot of flack for it because he's not exactly the most physical player. But what he did say makes sense in that like the team that usually plays with more force and more physicality tends to get like more of the calls going their way and tends to win more of the games. So in a game like this, a really important game five, a potential like hinge point for the series, who's going to bring more physicality tonight? Is it going to be the OKC bigs specifically, which we saw from Hartenstein and some of their like wings and things like that, or are we going to see that from the Spurs? Are we going to see their guards getting downhill, driving through traffic, putting pressure on the rim, and are we going to see it from Wemby? Obviously through just like his roll gravity and things like that, his vertical spacing and all that. So I'm excited to see who brings the physicality tonight, who puts more force on the other team.
Okay, so the all NBA teams were just released recently, so we're just gonna react to them. And so the teams are as follows. For the first team, we have Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, and those both were unanimous. Then everyone else was Victor Wembanyama, Luka Doncic, and Cade Cunningham. Obviously, Luka and Cade got approved for their like exception for the 65 game minimum. And then going to the second team here, we have Jaylen Brown, Kawhi Leonard, Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, and Jalen Brunson. And then lastly, for the third team, Tyrese Maxey, Jamal Murray, Jalen Johnson, and then Jalen Duren, Chet Holmgren. So, what are your thoughts, Jay? You think anyone got snubbed? Anyone should be higher, lower? What's your reaction here?
I mean, I think the teams are overall like pretty. I like what all the teams are looking like. I think it's somewhat similar to what we had when we did our predictions prior to when the playoffs started. So I like what I'm seeing with most of them. The only thing I would think about maybe switching is potentially the Cade Cunningham and Jalen Brown one. And obviously both players did a lot with their teams and had a lot to do with their team success, and specifically not because their teams weren't great outside of them. We saw that specifically in the playoffs with the Pistons, it was really just Cade, and like he had to carry a lot of like what was around him on the roster. But I think Jalen Brown might have had an argument for that first team spot, just switching there with what he did over the whole season, and especially with just the uncertainty and the inconsistency of not having his best player alongside him for the whole season. I think you could maybe make the argument he might have been a more valuable player, so maybe like would he have that first team argument over Cade? But these are really splitting hairs, and these are two guys that really carried. Obviously the top two seeds in the Eastern Conference, so these are two guys that didn't like obviously have great arguments, so I could see it going either way. I guess the other guy that I wanted to touch on was Jalen Duren for the Pistons, and obviously we all saw like this playoffs like was not great for him, getting outplayed in both the Magic series and the Cavaliers series. But I think like it was just we just have to remind people that it's based on a regular season thing we were just talking about before we started recording. It's a regular season all NBA team. It's all based on a regular season stats and play and everything like that. So I think he definitely did deserve it. I guess this makes it harder with the Supermax extension that's going to be coming for him. I guess it makes it harder for the Pistons front office and what they're going to have to be offering him. But it's good to see him make the team. I think we both predicted him to be making third team as well. Because usually for the top two seeds in the conference, like we see with Chet Holmgren as well in the third team, our top seeds in the conference, you usually see like you want to see two guys get rewarded for that because usually it's not just all one guy. So I like seeing that for Jalen Duren. So yeah, Jalen Duren and Jalen Brown, probably the two guys that I just wanted to mention there.
Yeah, like kind of like you said, Cade and Jalen Brown, and they were kind of like as you said, it was reflected in the voting where it was Cade got 60 first team votes and Jalen Brown got 44, and out of all, that was the closest voting difference there. So I think you probably could give the edge to Jalen Brown just because like the expectations for the Celtics were down here, and he really exceeded them, got them to the two seed. But then again, it's not like Cade Cunningham isn't deserving, so either one of those is fair there, in my opinion. I think the other one that could be argued is I personally would have Tyrese Maxey on the second team and have Kevin Durant on the third team, maybe flip those two guys. I feel like um, I mean, they were both similarly seeded. The Rockets are the five seed, Sixers are the seven seed. But I think all NBA, like your individual performance, it does matter, even though it's kind of like you rarely see guys on losing teams make all NBA.
Mhm.
But I think individually, like Tyrese Maxey averaged like almost 30. He was like the clear alpha on that team, whereas like Kevin Durant, obviously he averaged like his usual 25 a night on like ridiculous efficiency, but I don't think he's really like the standalone alpha on that team. Like they had other guys who were contributing in different ways, maybe not on offense. So I personally would have had Maxey on the second team, KD on the third, but again, not a huge difference there. I think one question I had was what are your thoughts on like now all NBA being like positionless where we don't have to really care about like center, forwards, guards? I saw the only reason that Wemby didn't get unanimous first team, because I was surprised he got 99 out of 100 votes, was so the guy who voted for Wemby, he said that he still votes positionally because he doesn't want to like take away from like the previous years where like we had so many dominant centers, but only one got first team. So that guy, he gave Jokic the first team nod and then Wemby the second team. So what are your thoughts on this being positional now
I
or
honestly,
non-positional?
I like agree with the sentiment from that guy because I remember when this changed to the position list. I want to say it was 2023 when they changed it. I remember saying like thinking like I think this is a mistake because it helps you keep sort of a record of who would have been almost like think about it, who would be the best hypothetical starting five in each season of the history of the NBA. Because especially when you look at it and you say, and I agree with the idea of what this guy was saying. I think it was Justin Termini was the one voter that didn't have Wemby on it. But you can split hairs on whether you thought Wemby or Jokic was the best center this year. But I think there's part of it should be like, and when you typically play your starting lineups, you really only have one center. You're only gonna have one 7-footer out there. I think you could argue part of it is because of the modern NBA and things like that. Maybe this is the type of era where we're not going to play. You would play Wemby and Jokic at the same time. Like now, it'd be like different in the way teams are structured. But I think you just have to look at it and say, okay, I think it should have been kept with the positions, right? The two guard, two forward, and a center denominations. I think it should have been kept that way, mostly because I think it preserves the history of the league. Because you can look back at the MVPs, you can look back at the finals MVPs, you can look back at the finals records and things like that, and say, okay, this is a snapshot of like who was the best regular season player in the league this time, who won the championship, who had the best finals performance and things like that. That all helps you keep a good like record of what happened in the league. But I think all defense and all NBA teams specifically, those also help you keep really good markers of who was good in the regular season. And it's also good markers of being like, okay, this guy did have a good regular season. This guy didn't have a good regular season, but he had like a good finals run or something like that. I'm sure there's probably instances of a guy. The one thing I'm trying to think of off the top of my head, there's probably a guy that's won Finals MVP but didn't even make an All NBA team or something like that. So it's probably the one off the top of my head I can maybe think of in 1981 when Cedric Maxwell wins the Finals MVP for the Celtics. Like he wasn't. I mean, I think he was a starter for them, but I doubt he was on any of the All NBA teams or something like that. Obviously, that's something I can check, but like so I think it's something you would want to keep just to be like, okay, these are records of who was the best at each of their positions at each of their time. I think that's also a good thing just to help with like the positional rankings. I agree with the sentiment. I think based on the way it is now, like he shouldn't have left Wemby off. Like you just have to get used to it. Like this is the way it is now. But I do agree with the sentiment of what he was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the defense for like people like for making a position list, a lot of people were saying like, oh, it'll still work out, or like the best five is pretty much going to be like one from each position, or like a couple just to have a starting lineup. But I mean, clearly this year you have like two centers and 3 point guards. So like,
Yeah,
yes, we are in positionless basketball, but I think just to be like also consistent with like history, where especially in like the 90s, 80s, where we saw like centers pretty much dominated basketball. We had so many good centers, yet only one got a first team All NBA nod. I think like just to keep it consistent because now you could have like a lot of centers get first team All NBA nods, and it really isn't the same as like a first team All NBA from like the 90s for the center position. So
yeah,
I think just to keep it consistent with history, it would be valuable to keep it position based. But at the same time, like you just have to like it's positionless. You can't vote like it isn't. That just kind of skews the voting for everyone else. I mean, obviously, didn't really matter too much in Wemby's case. He was still a solidified first team guy, but it'd be cool. Like he could say he had a unanimous first team All NBA vote, and he's clearly deserving of that type of recognition. So maybe next year he'll get it, I guess.
yeah. I think one thing maybe they could see about changing it is instead of going back to the strict position they had with two guards, two forwards, and a big, and in a medium between that and positionless, you could maybe do something like three guards, two forwards, wings or something like that, and or two bigs or something like that, and you can count your forwards within bigs or something like that, or two guards and like three bigs or something like that. So just make it maybe a little bit less restrictive with the center and forward. Center and forward denotions, but I think they might want to investigate something just to put it a little bit more in the position for the context of history.
Yeah, so I think that's gonna otherwise wrap it up here for episode 11 of the podcast. I think by next episode, the series should be wrapped up. If not by the end, I think it'll be wrapped up. So we'll have our finals matchup set. Whoever takes on the Knicks will preview that in our next episode. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that, we started about 2 months ago and the playoffs are almost over. So it's been a good ride. Thanks for joining and tune in next time.